Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he walked into the busy spaceport bar. His cargo ship had just finished another long trip to the outer colonies, and his back ached from loading heavy supply boxes for 3 days straight. The New Angeles spaceport never slept, and neither did its main watering hole where pilots, traders, and travelers from across the galaxy came to drink and make deals. The bar buzzed with conversation in dozens of languages. Tall, blue-skinned Altarians argued over shipping contracts while short, furry vegan traders counted credits at corner tables. Jake found an empty spot at the bar and ordered his usual, cheap whiskey that burned going down but helped him forget how little money was left in his account. "Another rough haul?" asked Marcus, the bartender who knew most of the regular human pilots. 3 days of loading mining equipment to Kepler Station, Jake replied, taking a sip. The pay barely covered fuel costs. "That's the life of an independent pilot," Marcus said with a sympathetic nod. "The big corporations are squeezing out the small guys." Jake was about to respond when loud voices caught his attention. Across the room, 3 large Korthak traders had surrounded a table where a woman sat alone. The Korthaks were known for their aggressive business tactics and bad tempers. "You cannot refuse our offer," one of the Korthaks growled, his thick accent making the words sound like threats. "No one else will give you better terms." The woman at the table remained calm, but Jake could see tension in her shoulders. She had unusual features that marked her as non-human. Pale blue skin that seemed to glow softly in the dim bar light, silver hair that fell past her shoulders, and eyes that reminded Jake of distant stars. She was beautiful in a way that made it hard to look away. "I said no," she replied quietly, her voice carrying a musical quality. "Please leave me alone." "We do not take no for an answer," another Korthak snarled, leaning closer to her table. "You will sign our contract or face the consequences." Jake felt his protective instincts kick in. He had grown up with 3 younger sisters and could never stand to see anyone being bullied. Setting down his drink, he walked over to the table. "Excuse me, gentlemen," Jake said, keeping his voice friendly but firm. "The lady asked you to leave her alone." The 3 Korthaks turned to face him, and Jake realized they were each about a foot taller and much broader than he was. Their red eyes glowed with anger, and their sharp teeth were visible as they snarled. "This is not your business, human," the largest Korthak said. "Walk away before you get hurt." "I'm making it my business," Jake replied, crossing his arms. 3 against 1 isn't fair odds in any culture I know. The woman looked up at Jake with surprise. Her strange, star-like eyes seemed to study his face carefully, as if trying to understand why a stranger would help her. "You should listen to your friend," she said softly to the Korthaks. "I have already given you my answer." The lead Korthak reached for something at his belt, but the bartender's voice boomed across the room. "No weapons in my bar." Marcus shouted, one hand on the shotgun he kept behind the counter. "You Korthaks know the rules. Either conduct business like civilized beings or take it outside." The 3 aliens looked around and noticed that other patrons had stopped talking to watch the confrontation. Several other human pilots had stood up from their tables ready to back up Jake if needed. The Korthaks realized they were outnumbered. "This is not over," the lead Korthak warned the woman before storming out with his companions. Jake pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. "Are you okay?" She nodded slowly, still studying his face. "Thank you for helping me. I am called Zara." "Jake Morrison," he replied, extending his hand. She shook it with a grip that was surprisingly strong. "Can I buy you a drink?" "You look like you could use one after that." "That is very kind," Zara said. "I would appreciate it." Jake waved to Marcus, who brought over 2 glasses of the bar's best imported wine. Much more expensive than Jake's usual drink, but he figured the situation called for it. "So what was that all about?" Jake asked as they sipped their wine. Zara sighed. "I am trying to arrange transport to Kepler 442b for business purposes." The Korthaks offered their services, but their terms were unacceptable. "The mining colony?" Jake asked. "That's a rough place to do business." "What kind of work are you in?" "Import and export," Zara replied carefully. "I help arrange trade agreements between different worlds." Jake nodded. It was a common enough profession in the age of interstellar commerce, though something about her seemed unusual for a typical trader. Her clothes were simple but made of expensive-looking materials, and she carried herself with a confidence that suggested she was used to being in charge. "I actually run cargo to that area pretty regularly," Jake said, If you need transport, I could probably help you out. My ship isn't fancy, but she's reliable. Zara's eyes brightened with interest. You would do that? Sure, Jake said. I was planning to head out that way next week anyway. Could use the extra income from a passenger. They talked for the next hour, and Jake found himself enjoying Zara's company more than he had expected. She asked thoughtful questions about human culture, and seemed genuinely interested in his stories about life as an independent pilot. She had a way of listening that made him feel like his words mattered. You risk your life regularly for very little profit, she observed. Why do you choose this life? Jake shrugged. Freedom, I guess. No boss telling me what to do, no corporate rules to follow. I go where I want, when I want, even when it means struggling financially. Money isn't everything, Jake said. Besides, someone has to supply the outer colonies. The big shipping companies won't bother with small deliveries to remote places. Zara smiled at this, and Jake noticed that her expression held something that looked almost like approval. I think I would very much like to travel on your ship, she said finally. Great, Jake replied. I'll be leaving in 5 days. Meet me at Docking Bay 47. As they finished their drinks, Jake found himself looking forward to having Zara as a passenger. There was something mysterious about her that intrigued him, and he sensed there was much more to her story than she was letting on. Little did he know that this simple act of kindness would change his life forever. 5 days later, Jake stood beside his cargo ship, the Wanderer, checking his equipment one final time. The ship was 20 years old and showed her age, with patches on the hull and mismatched replacement parts, but her engines were solid and she had never let him down. Zara arrived exactly on time, carrying only a small travel bag. She wore practical clothes suitable for space travel, but Jake noticed they still looked more expensive than anything he owned. Welcome aboard the Wanderer, Jake said, showing her around the small ship. She's not much to look at, but she'll get us where we need to go safely. Zara examined everything with careful attention. She is well maintained, she said, running her fingers along a repaired section of wall. You take good care of her. A ship is only as reliable as the pilot who maintains her, Jake replied. My father taught me that. The journey to Kepler 442b would take 6 days through normal space lanes, with stops at 3 trading posts along the way. As they settled into the routine of space travel, Jake discovered that Zara was an excellent traveling companion. She was quiet when he needed to concentrate on piloting, helpful with ship maintenance, and engaging in conversation during their meals together. At their first stop,
Haven Station. Jake was surprised by how much Zara knew about interstellar trade.
when he was negotiating with a difficult Centauri merchant over delivery prices, she whispered suggestions in his ear that helped him secure a much better deal than usual. How did you know he would accept that counteroffer? Jake asked as they walked away with a signed contract worth 3 times his normal rate. Centaurians value honor above profit, Zara explained. When you mentioned your reputation for always completing deliveries on time, it meant more to him than the money. Jake stared at her with amazement. I've been dealing with Centaurians for 5 years and never realized that. Different species have different priorities, she said simply. Understanding what they value is the key to successful negotiation. At their second stop, New Gibraltar, Zara's knowledge proved valuable again. She helped Jake navigate complex customs regulations that would have normally cost him hours of paperwork and expensive fees. She seemed to know exactly which forms to fill out and which officials to speak with. You're really good at this, Jake said as they left the customs office with all their permits approved in record time. How long have you been in the trade business? Most of my life, Zara replied, which was technically true but not the whole truth. That evening, as they sat in the ship's small common area sharing dinner, Jake found himself studying Zara's face in the soft light. There was something about her that didn't add up. She claimed to be a simple trader, but she spoke multiple alien languages fluently, understood complex regulations across different star systems, and carried herself with the confidence of someone used to getting her way. Can I ask you something? Jake said finally. Of course, are you really just a trader? Because you seem to know an awful lot about how things work in this part of the galaxy. Zara was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. My family has been involved in interstellar commerce for many generations. I learned from the best teachers. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the complete truth either. Her family did control vast commercial interests, but they were among the most powerful beings in known space. Their third stop was at Frontier Base, a rough trading post on the edge of civilized space. The station was filled with miners, smugglers, and other people who lived on the margins of galactic society. Jake felt protective of Zara in this environment, but she handled herself with calm confidence. While Jake was loading supplies, Zara disappeared for an hour. When she returned, she had somehow arranged for them to carry a cargo of rare metals to Kepler 442b, adding another substantial payment to their trip. "How did you manage that?" Jake asked in amazement. "I've been trying to get a cargo contract at this station for years. I happened to meet someone who needed reliable transport," Zara said with a mysterious smile. What she didn't tell him was that she had used her real identity to make a few discreet communications, calling in favors from business partners who owed her family loyalty. She was careful to do it in a way that wouldn't expose who she really was. But it allowed her to help Jake without him knowing. As they approached Kepler 442b on their final day of travel, Jake realized how much he had enjoyed having Zara aboard his ship. She was intelligent, kind, and surprisingly easy to talk with. He found himself wishing their journey didn't have to end. "So what's your business on Kepler?" he asked as they prepared for landing. "I need to meet with some people about a potential investment opportunity," Zara replied. "It may take several days to complete." "I'll probably be hanging around for a while too," Jake said. "The mining colony always needs supplies, and your cargo contacts set me up with more work than I usually get." Zara smiled at this news. She had been hoping for a reason to spend more time with Jake. Over the past week, she had watched him work and had been impressed by his integrity, work ethic, and genuine kindness. He treated everyone with respect regardless of their species or status, and he took pride in doing his job well even when no one was watching. These were exactly the qualities her people valued most. And Zara found herself drawn to Jake in a way she had never experienced before. He didn't know she was wealthy or powerful. He liked her for herself, not for what she could offer him. As the Wanderer touched down on Kepler 442b's landing pad, neither Jake nor Zara realized that their partnership was about to be tested in ways they couldn't imagine. The mining colony was facing a crisis that would challenge everything Jake believed about right and wrong, and force Zara to decide how far she was willing to go to protect someone she was beginning to care about deeply. But for now, they were simply two people who had found an unexpected connection among the stars, and that was enough. Jake woke up to emergency sirens blaring across Kepler 442b's main settlement. He quickly dressed and rushed outside to find crowds of worried colonists gathered in the streets. The air was filled with the sound of medical transports and shouting voices. "What's happening?" he asked a nearby miner. "Plague outbreak," the man replied, his face pale with fear. "Started 3 days ago in the deep mines. Now it's spreading through the whole colony." Jake felt his stomach drop. He had been on Kepler 442b for 2 days, delivering supplies and waiting for Zara to finish her mysterious business meetings. Now he realized why the streets had seemed unusually quiet yesterday. He found Zara at the small cafe where they had agreed to meet for breakfast. She looked as concerned as he felt. "How bad is it?" she asked when he sat down. "Bad," Jake replied. "The local news says over 500 people are sick already. The medical facilities can't handle this many patients." Before Zara could respond, a corporate official in an expensive suit approached their table. His badge identified him as a representative of Galactic Mining Incorporated, the company that owned most of Kepler 442b's operations. "Attention all non-essential personnel," the man announced loudly to the cafe. "GMI is arranging immediate evacuation transport for all employees and visitors. Report to the main landing pad within 6 hours for departure." Jake raised his hand. "What about the colonists who aren't GMI employees?" The official looked at him with cold indifference. "Company policy only covers evacuation of corporate personnel. Independent contractors and local residents must arrange their own transport." "That's crazy," Jake said, standing up. "There are over 3,000 people in this colony. Most of them don't have enough money for emergency transport off-world." "That is not GMI's responsibility," the official replied. "We suggest they contact their planetary government for assistance." Jake looked around the cafe and saw the faces of families who had been abandoned by the company they worked for. Children, elderly people, and sick colonists who would be left behind while the wealthy evacuated to safety. "This is wrong," Jake said to Zara after the official left. They can't just abandon these people. Zara nodded, but she was thinking about more than just the moral problem. She had resources that could help, but using them would mean revealing who she really was. She watched Jake's face and saw the determination building in his eyes. "I'm going to help evacuate them," Jake said suddenly. "How?" Zara asked. "Your ship can only carry 20 passengers at most." "Then I'll make multiple trips," Jake replied. "The Wanderer isn't fancy, but she's reliable. I can run shuttles to the nearest safe planet until everyone who wants to leave is evacuated." "Jake, that could take weeks. The fuel cost alone would bankrupt you." "I don't care about the money," he said firmly. "These people need help, and I'm not going to stand by and watch them die." Zara felt something warm spread through her chest as she listened to him. This was exactly the kind of moral courage her people valued most, the willingness to sacrifice personal gain to help others. Over the next 12 hours, Jake organized the most ambitious rescue operation of his career. He contacted every independent pilot he knew, begging them to help with the evacuation. Some agreed, but many were afraid of catching the plague or couldn't afford to work without payment. Jake began making trips immediately, loading his ship with sick children and elderly colonists first. Each round trip to the nearest safe planet took 8 hours, and he pushed his ship's engines to their limits to make the journey faster. Zara quietly used her contacts to arrange things Jake needed: medical supplies, fuel deliveries, and navigation clearances that would normally take days to process. She was careful to make it seem like coincidences or lucky breaks. But her help made Jake's rescue operation possible. By the third day, Jake had evacuated over 200 people, but he was exhausted and running out of fuel money. That's when the real opposition began. A squad of GMI security ships arrived and blocked the main landing pad where Jake's ship was parked. "Jake Morrison," announced the lead security officer, a stern woman in corporate uniform. "You are ordered to cease all evacuation activities immediately." "On whose authority?" Jake demanded. "Galactic Mining Incorporated holds exclusive transport contracts for this colony," she replied. "Your unauthorized evacuation flights are interfering with company business and violating our agreements with the colonial government." "People are dying," Jake said angrily. "Your company abandoned them." "GMI fulfilled its legal obligations by evacuating all company personnel," the officer replied coldly. "Independent residents assumed the risks when they chose to live here." "That's the most heartless thing I've ever heard," Jake said. The security officer handed him an official document. "You have 2 hours to leave this system. If you attempt any further evacuation flights, your pilot's license will be revoked, and you will face criminal charges." Jake read the legal papers with growing anger. GMI was using their political influence to stop rescue operations that made them look bad for abandoning the colonists. That evening, Jake sat in his ship feeling defeated. He had saved over 200 people, but nearly 3,000 remained trapped on the plague-infected world. "I can't fight a corporation that size," he told Zara. "They have lawyers, political connections, and security forces. I'm just one pilot with an old cargo ship." Zara sat beside him and took his hand. "What you've done is remarkable. You've proven that one person can make a difference." "It's not enough," Jake said sadly. "Those people are going to die because I don't have enough power or money to stand up to GMI." Zara looked at Jake's tired, worried face and made her decision. She had been testing him without him knowing it, watching to see if he possessed the qualities her people valued. He had passed every test with honors. More importantly, she realized she loved him for who he was, not for what he represented. But loving someone meant being honest with them, even when it was difficult. "Jake," she said softly, "there's something I need to tell you about who I really am." Before she could continue, new alarms began sounding across the colony. The plague was spreading faster and more people were dying. Time was running out for everyone still trapped on Kepler 42b. Zara knew that the moment of truth had arrived. She would have to reveal her secret and hope that Jake could forgive her for the deception, because she was about to use all of her power to help him save lives. The next morning, Jake received a message that made his blood boil. GMI was taking him to a corporate tribunal for violating exclusive transport contracts and interfering with lawful business operations. If found guilty, he would lose his pilot's license and face 5 years in prison. "They're really going to destroy me for trying to save lives," Jake said bitterly as he read the legal documents. Zara watched his face carefully. Jake, before this gets any worse, I need to tell you something important. What is it? He asked, not looking up from the papers. I'm not who you think I am, she began carefully. My name really is Zara, but I'm not a simple trader. Jake finally looked at her. What do you mean? Before Zara could answer, the space around Kepler 442b suddenly filled with ships. Not just any ships. Massive, elegant vessels that seemed to be made of crystal and starlight. Jake had never seen anything like them. Those are ethereal consortium ships, Jake said in amazement. What are they doing here? Zara took a deep breath. They're here because I called them. You called them? How could you possibly contact the most powerful trading organization in the galaxy? Because, Zara said quietly, I am Zara Valthis, heir to the Ethereal Consortium. The organization you're talking about belongs to my family. Jake stared at her in shock. The Ethereal Consortium controlled trade routes across 3 galactic sectors. They were so wealthy and powerful that entire planets negotiated with them as equals, and Zara was telling him she was their heir apparent. That's impossible, Jake said finally. You're just Zara. You traveled on my old cargo ship. You helped me negotiate with traders. I did those things because I wanted to, Zara replied. I was traveling in disguise looking for someone special. Looking for someone? What kind of someone? Zara's glowing skin seemed to brighten slightly. My people have a tradition. When we come of age, we must find a mate who demonstrates honor, courage, and wisdom. Someone who cares more about doing what's right than gaining wealth or power. Jake felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. You were testing me. At first, yes, Zara admitted. But it became much more than that. I fell in love with you, Jake Morrison. Not because you passed some test, but because of who you are. Before Jake could respond, his communication system activated. The image of a GMI corporate executive appeared on his screen. Mr. Morrison, the executive said coldly, report to Tribunal Chamber 7 immediately for your hearing. I'll be right there, Jake replied, but his mind was spinning. The woman he had grown to love was one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and he was about to be destroyed by a corporation that was tiny compared to her influence. As they walked toward the tribunal chamber, Jake saw something that took his breath away. The hallway was lined with representatives from dozens of different worlds, species he had never seen before, all wearing formal diplomatic clothing. At the front of the group stood a figure in flowing robes that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. Who are all these people? Jake whispered. Consortium ambassadors, Zara replied. They came to witness my decision. The tribunal chamber was packed with GMI executives, legal representatives, and now dozens of alien diplomats. Jake felt very small and alone as he took his place at the defendant's table. The chief tribunal judge, a stern human woman in corporate robes, began the proceedings. Jake Morrison, you are charged with violating exclusive transport contracts and interfering with lawful corporate business. How do you plead? Not guilty, Jake replied firmly. I was trying to save lives. The law does not recognize moral justification for breach of contract, the judge said coldly. GMI has exclusive rights to all transport services in this system. Just as the prosecutor was about to present his case, the chamber doors opened. Zara walked in, but she looked completely different. Her simple clothes had been replaced by elaborate robes that sparkled like stars. Her silver hair was arranged in an intricate style, and she wore jewelry that probably cost more than Jake's ship. The entire room went silent. I am Zara Valthis of the Ethereal Consortium, she announced, her voice carrying an authority that made everyone sit up straighter. I claim right of intervention in these proceedings. The GMI executives looked terrified. The judge appeared confused. Ms. Valthis, this is a corporate tribunal, not an interstellar court. Any legal action against Jake Morrison affects consortium interests, Zara declared. He is under our protection. On what grounds? The prosecutor demanded. On the grounds that I am formally proposing union with him according to ethereal customs, Zara announced. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Jake felt like he couldn't breathe. Marriage to Zara would make him one of the most influential humans in the galaxy, but it would also mean that their entire relationship had been built on deception. The judge banged her gavel for order. Mr. Morrison, do you accept this proposal? Everyone in the room turned to look at Jake. He stood up slowly, his mind racing. He looked at Zara, beautiful and powerful in her formal robes, surrounded by diplomats and wealth beyond imagination. Then he thought about the simple woman who had traveled on his ship, who had helped him negotiate better deals, who had listened to his stories about life as an independent pilot. Which one was the real Zara? No, Jake said quietly. The words seemed to echo in the silent chamber. Zara's face went pale. I don't accept, Jake said more loudly. I don't know who you really are, Zara. I thought I was falling in love with a traitor who understood the struggles of ordinary people. Now I find out you're basically space royalty who was testing me like some kind of laboratory experiment. Jake, please, Zara said, her composed mask beginning to crack. Let me explain. Explain what? That our entire relationship was fake? That you were judging me the whole time to see if I was worthy of your attention? The judge looked confused by this turn of events. Mr. Morrison, are you refusing protection from the ethereal consortium? I'm refusing to be anyone's pet project, Jake replied. I'll face these charges on my own. Jake turned and walked out of the tribunal chamber, leaving behind a room full of shocked diplomats and a woman who had just realized that power and wealth couldn't buy the one thing she really wanted, genuine love and respect from someone who saw her as an equal. Behind him, Zara stood frozen, understanding for the first time what she had lost by not being honest from the beginning. 3 months later, Jake was loading cargo on a small space station near the outer rim when he heard familiar footsteps behind him. He turned to see Zara approaching, but she looked different again. Gone were the elaborate robes and jewelry. Instead, she wore simple work clothes and carried a basic travel bag. Hello, Jake, she said quietly. Zara. He continued loading boxes, trying to ignore the way his heart sped up at seeing her. What brings the heir to the ethereal consortium to a place like this? Actually, I'm not the heir anymore, she replied. I resigned from the consortium 3 months ago. Jake stopped working and stared at her. You what? I gave up my position, my inheritance, everything, Zara explained. I realized that you were right. I was treating you like a test subject instead of a person I cared about. Why would you do that? Jake asked, genuinely confused. Because I learned something important from you, she said. Real relationships have to be between equals. As long as I had all that power and wealth, we could never be truly equal partners. Jake set down the cargo box he was holding. So what are you doing now? Learning to be a real trader, Zara replied with a small smile. It's harder than I expected when you don't have unlimited resources and family connections. I've been working on small transport ships doing the same kind of work you do. Despite himself, Jake was impressed. That must have been quite an adjustment. It was humbling, she admitted. But it also showed me what I was missing when I lived in luxury. There's satisfaction in honest work that I never experienced before. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Jake wanted to ask why she had come to find him, but he was afraid of the answer. Jake, Zara said finally, I know you have every right to hate me for lying to you, but I need to tell you something important. What? That situation on Kepler 442b wasn't resolved when you walked away from the tribunal. GMI is still abandoning colonies when problems arise. They've done it to 3 more planets since then. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. And nobody's stopping them? That's why I'm here, Zara said. I want to stop them, but I can't do it alone. I need someone who understands what it's like to be an ordinary person, fighting against corporate power. What are you suggesting? A partnership, she replied. Not as a powerful heiress and a small pilot, but as 2 people who want to make things better for colonists and independent traders. Jake studied her face carefully. What kind of partnership? I still have some resources left from my time with the consortium, Zara explained. Not the vast wealth I used to control, but enough to fund a small operation. You have something I don't have, the trust and respect of independent pilots and colonists. Together we could create an organization that protects people from corporate abuse. And what makes you think I'd want to work with you after what happened? Zara looked down at her hands. Because despite everything, I believe we make a good team. And because I'm hoping that someday you might be able to forgive me for not being honest from the beginning. Before Jake could answer, his communication system activated. A distress signal was coming from New Harmony, a farming colony 2 systems away. This is Mayor Rodriguez of New Harmony, a desperate voice said. Our crops have been infected with a blight, and AgriCorp is refusing to send medical supplies unless we sign a new contract that would give them ownership of our land. Please, if anyone can help us, we're running out of time. Jake looked at Zara. What do you think? I think New Harmony needs help, she replied. and I think we're the right people to provide it. Jake made his decision. All right, partner. But we do this as equals. No secret resources, no hidden agendas. Everything out in the open. Agreed, Zara said with a smile that reminded Jake of why he had fallen for her in the first place. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Jake and Zara worked together to organize a relief effort for New Harmony. Using Jake's contacts among independent pilots and Zara's knowledge of corporate law to outmaneuver AgriCorp's attempts to steal the colonists' land. It wasn't easy. They argued frequently about strategy and sometimes clashed over Jake's impulsive nature versus Zara's careful planning. But they also discovered that they worked well together when they combined their different strengths. The New Harmony operation was a success. They saved the colony's crops and exposed AgriCorp's illegal contract practices, which led to a galactic investigation that shut down similar schemes on dozens of other worlds. More importantly, Jake and Zara learned to trust each other again. Working as genuine partners, they began to rebuild the relationship that had been damaged by deception and misunderstanding. 6 months later, their small organization had grown into a network of independent pilots, legal advocates, and colonial representatives who worked together to protect vulnerable communities from corporate exploitation. Jake stood on the observation deck of their new headquarters station, watching ships come and go in the busy docking bays below. Zara joined him carrying 2 cups of coffee. Hard to believe how much has changed, Jake said, accepting the coffee gratefully. We've accomplished a lot, Zara agreed, but there's still so much work to do. Are you sorry you gave up your old life? Jake asked. Zara considered the question seriously. I miss the resources sometimes. It would be easier to help people if we had unlimited funding, but I don't miss the isolation or the constant testing of people's motives. This life is harder, but it's also more real. And us? Jake asked quietly. Are we real now? Zara turned to face him. I hope so. I know I hurt you by not being honest from the beginning, but everything I felt for you was genuine, even if the situation wasn't. Jake set down his coffee and took her hands. I've been thinking about that a lot. Maybe the situation was artificial, but your reactions weren't. When you helped those colonists on Kepler, when you stood up to GMI, when you gave up everything to come find me, those were real choices that showed me who you really are. So what are you saying? Zara asked hopefully. I'm saying that I love you too, Jake replied. Not the mysterious traitor from the bar, and not the powerful heiress in the tribunal chamber. I love the woman who works 18-hour days to help strangers and argues with me about the best way to solve problems. They kissed as the stars wheeled slowly outside the observation deck windows. 2 people who had found something more valuable than wealth or power. A partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine love. Their organization continued to grow, eventually becoming a force that corporations across the galaxy had to respect. But Jake and Zara never forgot that their greatest achievement wasn't building something powerful, but learning to trust each other completely, and in the end, the trust became the foundation for everything else they accomplished together among the stars.